have to, we must, because, you know, when they bombed the World Trade Center in 1993, 6 lives were lost. Now we've lost 6,000. Next time, given the fact that a small number of dedicated, evil, and sophisticated people can use technology, biological, chemical, nuclear weapons, it could be 6 million. So we have no choice. And to me, the $64,000 question, Larry, is not how we do it. I mean, we'll probably make a few mistakes along the way. We're fighting a new enemy. But whether America has the resolve to continue to do this. The President said to me the other day, he said, if, you know, Americans lose interest in this, if by the time the World Series rolls around or the Super Bowl rolls around, we have lost interest and we're not putting the same kind of focus that the nation put in after Pearl Harbor for unconditional surrender of the enemy, we won't succeed.
Let me get a call in.
That's the biggest challenge. That, to me, is the biggest challenge we face, not the specific tactics we use.
Dixon, Kentucky, hello.
Hi.
Hi.
What's the possibility that the Taliban or possibly Iraq acting as an ally to the Taliban, what's the possibility of nuclear defense to a U.S. offense?
Senator Shelby?
Oh, I think it's be very remote. I don't think right now Iraq has nuclear weapons. They really would like to have them, but they don't have them now. But there are other ways that they can hit at us. I do want to say one thing, follow up on what Chuck Schumer said just a minute ago, and I believe he's absolutely right. We shouldn't lose interest in this because this has become a wake-up call for us, a real wake-up call. And if we lose interest, then go about our business as usual, we will be hit again somewhere, just like happened the other day. It will be different, but it will be fear and fear and fear in America.
We thank you, Senator Shelby, Kerry, Lugar, and Schumer. We'll be hearing more from you. We have an extraordinary discussion coming up that dealing with a lot with biological weapons. Here's the scene of the nightly vigil at Union Square in New York. This goes on every night right there at 14th Street, Union's famous spot in semi-lower Manhattan. Joining us now, all from our bureau in New York, are 3 authors of a very important, timely book. They didn't time it this way, but it's the way it came out. Returning after being with us last night is Judith Miller, senior writer of the New York Times. Joining her is Stephen Engelberg, investigations editor of the New York Times, and William Broad, science writer of the New York Times. The book is Germs, Biological Weapons and America's Secret War. Miller is the expert on the Mideast. Engelberg focuses on terror and germ warfare from a CIA intelligence angle. And Broad is primarily a science writer. Let's start with William Broad. How far away, how close are we to seeing this?
Larry, no one knows. My crystal ball is as foggy as yours. This is a serious long-term problem. There's new technologies out there that'll let terrorists do things they could never, ever have imagined doing a decade ago. This is a serious long-term thing that we've got to keep our eye on. No one knows if or when this is going to happen. We hope to God that it doesn't. We wrote this book because we were afraid this issue was not getting the attention it deserved.
Stephen, what do we mean by America's secret war?
Well, over the last sort of 10 years, the United States has really been trying to get a handle on this problem. It's really an incredibly difficult problem. Imagine, if you would, that I gave you a plan of how to make a nuclear bomb. You would then have an enormous technical challenge ahead of you. You would have to find enriched uranium. You would have to build an infrastructure. You would have to figure out how high explosives work. It's an incredible thing to do. Now, places like Iraq have done it. Many places have tried. If I gave you one former Soviet scientist with the knowledge in his head of how to make germ weapons, he could very easily go ahead and assemble for a very small amount of money. In the book, we write about the fact that the Pentagon went to buy stuff off the shelf. They gave the team $1 million, and they were able for $1 million to create a workable germ factory that could make enough anthrax to kill, you know, all the people in New York, any number that you would like. So the secret war here is how to get at that. How do you attack that problem? And we're only at the beginning of it.
Judith, do you fear the people that did what they did last Tuesday have these weapons?
Well, Larry, we don't think they have them yet, But we do know that they've tried very hard, and they're continuing to try very, very hard to get them. And as someone who works there and who visits these places, we know from intelligence sources, and we report in the book, that in fact Osama bin Laden's camp, one of them in Afghanistan, was actually already experimenting with poisons, toxins, chemicals, perhaps biological agents, and we've seen some, in satellite photos, dead animals on one of these camp test ranges. So, my concern is that, yes, he will not give up until he gets them.
Before we ask about what's going on now and what we might react, is there, Mr. Broad, a defense of this?
Yeah, there's smart things there's ultimately no perfect defense, but there's a lot of smart stuff that we could do better. Today, we're vulnerable. We are, people could come in and hit us just as hard, or horribly, much, much harder than we just got hit at the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. But there are smart things to do to start to protect ourselves. We can start to make better detectors. We can start to reinforce the public health service. They're right on the front lines if there were an outbreak. Most importantly, we need to work, as everybody wants to do now, real hard on intelligence. That is the ultimate protection, to try to penetrate, to try to understand what's going on out there, and to stop it before a germ attack occurs. Because once it happens, it's going to be a nightmare.
Stephen Engelberg, what do you make of the fact, and on all of you to get on this, Judy wrote about it today, what do you make of the fact that the people who apparently did this were in their 30s, they drank, they commiserated in the community, they used mailboxes, etc. They booked flights through normal ways. Thousands of Americans booked flights. That's not normal kind of terrorism activity, is it?
Well, we are seeing a new kind of terrorist. We've been interviewing some people at the New York Times. The textbooks are all going to have to be rewritten. Yeah. We are seeing people who clearly came to the United States 18 months ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, with the intent that they would fit in the community and then, on a day to be determined, die. That is a very different thing from taking a 19-year-old or 18-year-old kid, indoctrinating him for 5 months and sending him off with a little bomb to blow up a pizza stand. And the level of preparation and logistics and coordination that this took is staggering. And I think we are, over the coming weeks and months, going to have to rethink everything that we've ever thought about how terrorism is done.
Judith, therefore, how do you counteract that?
Well, you have to be smarter than they are. We have to be always thinking as they would think, only faster and better. And as Bill said, the reason we wrote the book is that there are so many things, Larry, that this country could do and that we're now in a position to do and that have been recommended, by the way, for almost 50 years in terms of building a real civil defense for this country. And I would hope, and I think my colleagues agree, that this is the moment. If we don't do it now, I don't see how we would ever do it. And these are really very inexpensive things to do.
Let's include some phone calls for Judith Miller, Stephen Engelberg, and William Broad, all of the New York Times, all co-authors of Germs, Biological Weapons, and America's Secret War. Cincinnati, hello.
Yes, I was wanting to know what us as Americans would be able to do if you heard across the emergency broadcast service that there was a report of chemical warfare being used. What would be the first thing that we would be able to do, or what we would have to do?
William Broad, you're our science writer.
I would say the first thing I would do would be stay indoors, right? I mean, your house, your building are instant kind of nice, safe shelters. And, the thing not to do is panic. And I'd say, stay indoors, stay tuned to the radio or the TV to get information from the feds.
Dublin, Georgia, hello.
Yes, my question is, what does Afghanistan mean by extraordinary danger to its neighbors? What do they possess that can present extraordinary danger? I'd like to know what the panel thinks about that.
Good question. Stephen, what do you think they meant by that?
Well, you hear a lot of things. I mean, I would agree with the senator who said earlier it's unlikely they have nuclear weapons. However, they can make enormous trouble for their neighbors. Think about Pakistan, a country which teeters on the brink of all manner of violence. They have a very militant stripe through there. I think that they could really, destabilize Pakistan. But I think you really should ask Judy, who has been to these places and can tell you more about that.
All right, Judy, what could they do?
Well, they could certainly make life hell for their neighbors by doing to their neighbors what they have done to us. Every society is now vulnerable. Every neighbor has buildings and people and things that they care about. And if they continue this war and bring this war to their neighbors and not just to the great Satan, which is us, I think it would be very, very uncomfortable in the region.
Are you all, therefore, William Broad, I'll start with, are you therefore pessimistic short term?
No, short term, I am very optimistic. I mean, I think that I think this is a long-range problem in terms of germ warfare. You know, right now the government is waking up big time. The kind of preparations that have been half-hearted and in the works, they're coming right up to the fore now. People are getting serious finally about this stuff. And there are a lot of serious steps and preparations we can take. You know, we should be stockpiling smallpox vaccine. We should be making detectors better than we're doing. There's a whole list of things that have been half-hearted that are going to get serious now.
Why, Stephen, weren't we doing these things? I mean, obviously we had the information. You didn't start this book yesterday.
I think that government is a very slow beast to move to action. You see warnings and people don't move. You see small things, people move a little bit. What this incident, what these attacks have created is a kind of political will to do things that were implausible a week ago. You know, if you look at, I used to cover airplane crashes, and you would find almost in every failure of an airplane, you could go back several times to various incidents, and people would say, but the plane didn't crash. Why do we have to do all this unpleasant stuff? Now you see.
Judith Miller, you know bin Laden, and you've written about him. He denied it today. What do you make of that?
Well, that doesn't surprise me, Larry. He's always denied the operations for which the United States has given him credit. It's part of his M.O., if you will. He denies it, but he also adds a little, but I'm very proud of the people who did it. Now, he may have dropped that praise for the martyrs today because maybe he's really figuring out that what seemed good around the campfire in Kandahar has turned into something that can really come back and destroy not only his movement but the people who host him. In terms, Larry, of biological weapons, I think it's important to point out, and we write about this in our book, that in fact America has already been the subject of a biological attack, a bioterrorist attack, back in 1984. A small religious cult in Oregon went after the people of the Dalles, Oregon, and they made more than 700 of them sick to try and keep them from voting. And this was an incident which kind of alarmed the medical community and law enforcement at the time, and it was quickly forgotten. And the government decided that they were not going to pay much attention to it because they didn't want to give people ideas. I think the time for denial is over. I think the time to do something is now.
Judith, is there another name in the terrorist community, if not the equal of bin Laden, or around in that circle? Is there a terrorist number 2, terrorist number 3?
Absolutely, and that's why I've always been concerned about the focus, the over-focus on this one man.
Who are
He has
they?
a group around him. Well, you've never heard of their names, except perhaps in the New York Times, because we wrote about them, but they're men like Abu Zubaydah, a Palestinian who was trying to blow us all up during the millennium. There's a man named Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, who is a member of the Egyptian Jihad, which was the group that was partly responsible for the assassination of Anwar Sadat. There's another man, his military commander, named Abu Hafs al-Masri, another Egyptian militant. And these men could go on and take over the organization if something happened to Osama bin Laden. So I really think that we've got to avoid focusing on one personality. It is a network. It is, as Secretary Powell called it today, a holding company. You've got to decapitate the head from the networks, and then we'll start in on the rest. I think that's the government strategy, and I think it's the right one.
The CEO has to go.
The CEO has to go.
To Largo, Florida. Hello.
Yes, Larry. I just wanted to ask you.